Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity, community service, volunteering, and just spreading positivity. We're all about inspiring people and positive vibes here on the show. And with me today, I've got a very special guest. He has competed for wrestling promotions all across the East Coast, as well as made appearances for WWE, WCW, and ECW. I'm pleased to welcome the one and only Mike Maraldo, a.k.a. Ace Darling, to Wrestling with Heart. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Stan. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. So let's get started. Tell me about your childhood and upbringing. Where did you grow up?
Right here in New Jersey. I'm still here. I grew up in Freehold, kind of like in the center of the state, and my life was pro wrestling. That's all I cared about. I was like the wrestling kid in high school. You know, like every kid had either a football jersey on or a baseball jersey, and I had a Macho Man, an Ultimate Warrior shirt on. And so you figure I started watching in the mid 80s. So like eighth grade, ninth grade was like 89, 90, and that's all I cared about.
Yeah, you were like a super fan,
Yeah, I
pretty
got to go
much.
to I got to go to WrestleMania 5. I got to go to SummerSlam 89. I got to go to the remember the Slammy Awards?
Yes. Yep.
Do you remember when Hulk Hogan said the real American award goes to superstar Billy Graham? Well, superstar comes up and he hugs a kid in a blue hook-the-size shirt with long black hair at the time. That was me. So I had front row to the Slam. Yeah,
Oh,
man, it's great.
really?
I was the coolest kid in eighth grade that week.
That's so cool.
It was amazing. Yeah, I got to go to a lot of
Awesome.
cool stuff as a kid. My friend's dad had tickets to a lot of cool things.
Oh, man. So was Macho Man your favorite wrestler of all time?
Well, I'll tell you, I was a fan before this particular incident, but what really hooked me was Savage Steamboat. Just that when Savage came off with the bell, and it was just real. And not only was it real, you had to wait back then. Like if it was nowadays, Steamboat would be back in a week. They would have 25 matches before they meet at WrestleMania. Back then, it happened in like September, and they just teased it. They just teased it for months and months. And they did the matches on the live events, but on TV, no contact. You had to wait till WrestleMania. So I'm literally like Xing the days on my calendar till Steamboat can get his revenge on Savage back then. So that's what hooked me. You mentioned Savage, Steamboat, and Savage, and man,
That
what
was a
unbelievable
classic.
performers. Yeah, just both of them in general though. What performers they were. What pros. Wow.
What was it about each one that really inspired you or really got you, fascinated with the art of wrestling?
Steamboat was just how it was like now, like people kids I think nowadays watch Ricky Steamboat and just see the fluid motion and say, well, Steamboat was such a high flyer that if he could do it to this level, I'm going to do it to this level, and it's going to mean more. No, Steamboat mixed the perfect amount of scientific wrestling and high flying wrestling, and he was a good guy. He was a nice guy. You could tell when he came to the ring, this is a guy that appreciates people. I saw him one time out in the rain. He called a cab in the rain, and like 10 kids came up to him, and he stood out there in the rain signing autographs for them. So that's
Sweet.
and the way Steamboat sold. I mean, he just made you believe he was getting hurt. Savage, it was just hard to hate the guy no matter what he did because he was so athletic. No one did that elbow off the top. No one did that axe handle off to the floor. You figure, how far is that drop? You say to yourself, even as a kid, that's got to hurt the guy who's doing it. But Savage was just so hard to boo, even when he was a heel, because he was so damn good, and his promos were just unbelievable.
Oh yeah, I mean, Miss Elizabeth completed that package too, both of them were
Yeah.
just so legendary and iconic. Wow, that's so amazing. So, what was it that said in your head, this is what I want to go into?
It was just the biggest fan. Like, it was my obsession. Like, I knew I had to do it. It wasn't that I wanted to. I had to do it. So when I was 17, Iron Mike Sharp. Are you familiar with Iron Mike Sharp?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
he opened the wrestling school. It was door to door, 20 minutes from my house. That was perfect. So I was a senior in high school. I would go to school during the day. I had a weekend jobs, and I would train to be a wrestler at night. It was just amazing when you actually got to go in the ring and just learn pro wrestling.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, training to be a wrestler, comes with a lot of sacrifices, it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work involved. What was your experience like? Tell me, walk me through the training process.
As far as the school, it was 3 days a week. You went there and you learn how to take bumps, learn how to lock up. They never taught you the wrestling business. They never taught you psychology. They never taught you how to protect yourself in the ring. We just had it was really a ring, and we learned to take bumps. There was no like structure to the training there. Mike Sharp was a great guy, very honest man, very nice man, but he never taught the pro wrestling business or like what a babyface should do or what a heel should do. You kind of learn that on the job training. The sacrifices back then, they definitely weren't sacrifices because it's all I wanted to do. It hits me more now. Now I'm 49 years old and I haven't wrestled forever. Like my wife and kids are away for a week, so that means that I'm doing all the chores around the house I never did. So right now, like I'm literally looking straight at you, but if I have to turn my head this far or this far, it's shooting down my spine. Like I'm just I physically pay the price today. So those are my sacrifices, the pain that I go through today for the bumps I took 20 years ago.
You remember like any pieces of advice, Iron Mike Sharp gave you as far as like getting started in the business, before you started, wrestling, like making your debut?
None. Mike Sharp, he never locked up with me. He never got in the ring with me. He had a ring, and I always say this: there's a guy on the Indies, Mike Terrace, Mike Mars. He joined up when I did, and there was a guy there, Bobby Piper, who was more experienced than we were, who helped us as well. And the three of us would get there early, and we would just work out together for hours.
Oh man.
And it was just basically trying stuff on each other or asking Bobby Piper for help because yeah, Mike never got in the ring with us. I heard he did before I got there, but it wasn't really a structured. Okay, today we're going to go over these moves, or today we're going to go over promos. It was just kind of like you got there, you got in a ring, and you grabbed the corner, and you just tried to get some ring time. I'd say more like Jim Cornette gave me a lot of better, a lot of guidance. Bill
Oh, okay.
DeMott Bill DeMott gave me a lot of it, guidance. Anybody who was on a show that had more experience than me, I was always like a Chris Candido or Tito Santana. I was always going up to those guys saying, "Please watch my match. Please tell me what you think." So that's where I learned the most. Or I was fortunate enough to work for guys like Dennis Corluzzo, who would bring in like Buddy Landell or PG-13 or Too Cold Scorpio, or Chris Candido, guys with more experience. That's the only way you're going to get better. I mean, you see these
Mhm.
guys who say they've been wrestling for 15 years, who have 3 matches a year with their wrestling school buddies. You're not going to progress. You're going to have a wrestling school match. If you want to be able to be a worker, you need to get in there with better workers. Like any job on the planet. If you want to be better at something, you have to find people more experience and ask them, how do I get better? And get in there and do it with them.
Do you recall anything that Jim Cornette or some of the other people said to you whenever they got to see your work?
Yeah, Jim especially. Jim he would always, he would always manage me and Crowbar, Devin Storm,
Hmm.
when he was on the Indies here, and I worked against him a few times too, and with him on the outside, and he would do things like I remember working PG-13, and Jim was the heel manager for them. I did something where um, we did one spot where I ended up giving the one guy a kick, and like we'll say it's Wolfie D, and he rolled to the outside, and then his partner jumped in, and I went to give him the kick, and he took a powder on his ass, and then can I curse on here? Not that I will, but
It's fine.
is it allowed?
No
Okay,
worries.
okay, okay. And then Jim Cornette jumped on the apron, so I jumped and I just knew because I watched him in the Midnight Express 1,000 times. Knew he'd want me to do the same thing to him, like like run towards him with the super kick, and he'd powder real quick too. So he was just big on calling Wes in the back and just feeling things in the ring when the time was right. He was big on. I remember one time we had a match at a car dealership. So these aren't wrestling fans. These are just people who just showed up for the day. These aren't hardcore wrestling fans. And we were wrestling two guys and Crowbar had a broken hand. So it was literally me wrestling the whole match and tagging in Crowbar for a few things he would do. And Cornette said, "What?" And these two guys didn't look like they're very experienced. So Cornette said, "What are you guys doing?" And we told him. He's like, "No, you're not doing any of that." We're like, "Why not?" He's like, "Because there's 100 people here to buy a car. Why are you going to kill your bodies? This is what we're going to do." And he told us, and it got over so big, and it was just simple, 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 old school wrestling stuff that you would do in front of not so wrestling fans. Like, do you think wrestling fans want to see not wrestling fans want to see you go to top rope and do a Hurricanrana? They're going to tell their friends, "Oh, you got next time there's a show in 6 years at the car dealership. You got to come." No, they just want a gaga, a little entertainment.
Yeah.
And we did exactly what he said, and it got over huge. And we took I took 30 less bumps off my bump card. Every body has a bump limit, so it just he's just a mastermind. And if you're respectful to the business, I always say this about Jim Cornette. If you're respectful to the business and you show up with your ears open and your mouth shut and you look the part and you act the part, he has all the time in the world for you.
I love to
Love
hear
Jim
that.
Cornette.
Yeah.
Yeah, great guy.
Now, now I know he helped. He was, I believe, he was one of the co-founders of Ohio Valley Wrestling, or worked for OVW for many years. Were you a big fan of the Kentucky and Tennessee style of wrestling?
Yes, yes, I was fortunate enough to get a lot of the tapes from the OVW tapings, and Rob Conway, Nick Densmore, Danny Basham, Doug Basham, Johnny Jeter, all those guys, man. Those were guys. They could work. I
Oh
loved
yeah.
watching those episodic television. I had Nick Densmore on my excuse me, on my show, Wrestling Then and Now. Make sure you give me a subscribe.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, I just told Nick, or when I met Rob Conway for the first time, I just told these guys, man, your stuff was just great. Just those are guys who can go in there and have an hour match and not call a thing in the back. They just know how to work. Like the guys who spent time under Jim Cornette, once they got to the main roster, it's like they were overqualified for the job. They knew what to do in any situation and can make anything work. They didn't always get the greatest creative, but what they got, they could make work. They had cardio. They were just really good guys. I mean, look at yeah, and I don't mean like John Cena and like Batista and Brock Lesnar, because those weren't guys that joined the school. Those are guys that got signed and sent to the school. I mean, like homegrown guys like Nick Densmore and guys like that, Mike Mondo, like just they know how to work. They know how to go in there and, hey, I'll see you in there. Let's make magic.
And plus, a lot of those guys fans still remember to this day. Eugene, Rob Conway was a part of La Resistance, one of the most iconic, tag teams of the Ruthless Aggression era. I mean, it's so amazing that fans still remember them after all these years, and they got their start in OVW.
Resistance. Shout out to my boy Rene Dupree.
Yes.
I hang out online with him a lot. We do watch-alongs. He makes me watch the current product, so I hate his guts for that. But I love Rene Dupree and the
Yeah.
cafe.
Yeah. It's amazing. All right. So you got started in the business. You've been in the business a while. Who are like some of your favorite opponents to work with?
On the
Work
indies,
against, I should say.
it'd have to be Crowbar, Devin Storm, Billy Kidman. I had a lot of matches with him when before he was Billy Kidman. We were a tag team, and then after he got signed with WCW, and then he got so famous and stopped returning my calls. Anyway, Matt Quackenbush, Reckless Youth, Cheetah Master, Mike Tarris, Marty, if you got guys that you'd really know, like Marty Jannetty had probably my favorite match. I always wanted to wrestle five guys. Steamboat Savage never got to. Shawn Michaels I got to. Marty Jannetty I got to. Tito Santana I got to. So my match with Marty Jannetty, my match with Tito, was a couple matches with him were always special because he was my hero. Anytime I got to wrestle someone from my childhood, it was super cool. Like the Honky Tonk Man. I mean, do you think we're gonna work hard wrestling the Honky Tonk Man on an indie show in front of 100 people? No, we're gonna do it with Gaga. But it was awesome because I remember watching him as a seventh grader, saying, "Oh gosh, today's got to be the day that Savage is going to beat him for the IC title." You know, I mean, it's an emotional connection with the guy. I'll always have that. Every time I see the guy, I don't care how long I wrestled. Every time I see Tito Santana, and he's been on my show, and he talks to me like a peer. He's not. He's Tito Santana. He'll always be Tito Santana to me. You know, no matter how many times we get to hang out personally. Or King Kong Bundy was one of my best friends before he passed away. He had a wrestling school, and I did the training there. We'd hang out. We'd talk every day on the phone, and we'd hang out 3 times a week. But no matter when we were out, there's always a little part of me saying, "This is King Kong blanking Bundy, you know, effing Bundy. I can't believe it. This is a guy who I grew up watching beat up Hulk Hogan." So
Yeah,
it's important. It's
WrestleMania
important not.
too.
Yeah, it's important not to lose. You mentioned WrestleMania too. Hold on, I just saw it. Where is it? All right, here's a signed uh, a WrestleMania 2 VHS signed by King Kong Bundy. Yeah, he signed
Oh
that.
man.
He was, he was at my house for a barbecue. So, stuff like this. I'm very lucky in the fact that I was able to wrestle and then go on and live a normal life and have a wife and kids and career. But I still have those roots in pro wrestling. So, like when I get to do something and have something like that, I'll never sell it or throw it out.
That's amazing. That's like a collectibles item.
Yeah.
Yeah, so cool. So you've made some appearances for, WWE, WCW, ECW, the big promotions of the 90s. Any memories you care to share about making some appearances for the companies?
Never wrestled for ECW. It's out there that I did, but I never did. I wrestled everybody on the raw. I mean, I wrestled Raven, Richards, Pitbulls, Mikey, Carino 100 times, Balls, Axel, everybody, Danny Doring, Nunzio. I wrestled everybody on the roster, Meanie, but I never wrestled for them.
Hmm.
Memories, gosh, I mean, I got to wrestle for WWF, Shawn Michaels, Owen Hart, Bam Bam Bigelow, Savio Vega, Quebecers, Head Shrinkers, Too Cool, Headbangers, IRS, Jeff Jarrett, Ludwig Borga, Adam Baum, Bastion Booger. I had to wrestle everybody. It was a cool. I'll tell you, a cool moment was we were doing TV one time, and there was all these little locker rooms, and it was me and just two other enhancement guys. So we go to walk into a room, and it's just Shawn Michaels. And this is right before WrestleMania 10. So Shawn wasn't the megastar, but he had the rocket on
Yeah.
his butt. He was on the way, and we walk in. He's there all by himself. We say, "I'm sorry to bother you." He said, "No, no, guys, come in, sit down." So we talked wrestling with Shawn Michaels for 45 minutes, and he
Cool.
answered every question we had. And the biggest takeaway he gave us was, "Your job is to entertain the people and give them their money's worth, whether there's 100 people, whether it was 100,000 people." He goes, "I work the same." He goes, that was the biggest takeaway I got from him. And it was just amazing getting to share a room with him and pick his brain. And he was so giving of the knowledge. And I say that because you always hear horror stories. And I wasn't there. I wasn't on the road with him. I just did TV. You hear horror stories of how he was and how he treated people, but he gave me 45 minutes of his time, and I was nobody. Another story. Another story doing TV. I've told this one before, but I wrestled Ludwig Borga, and and I take really good bumps, so I knew I'd have a great match with him. And he said to me beforehand, I guess because listen, some of the enhancement guys were terrible. They weren't in shape. They had terrible gear. They had no business even being in the ring for a squash match. So I'm sure he had some bad squash matches. So he came up to me. And he was a big man. He was a scary man. He was, it wasn't like Crush was a big man, but he was a teddy bear in the ring. Bam Bam Bigelow was a big man, but you never felt him in there. This is a Ludwig Borga, and he had a reputation for being a little stiff in there. So he comes up to me, and I'll say the clean version. He comes up to me, and I mean, he gets this close to me. He goes, "Listen," he goes, "tonight, if you f up, I f you up." And he walked away, and I was like, "Whoa!" And Scott Steiner was sitting there. He's like, "Whoa!" I'm like, "Yeah, whoa!" But no, it was great. He was great. He loved it. Came back and he loved it. But that's another story. WCW, it was all right. Got to wrestle Hall and Nash, and got to wrestle Glacier. Glacier's a good guy. Ice Train, that took 10 years off my life.
Oh wow.
It was just so stiff and big and hit you so hard. You don't have to hit me hard. I'll take a bump, I promise. But yeah, the problem with WCW was there was so much great talent there at the time. Great talent. There was Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko and Billy Kidman and um,
Mysterio.
yeah, Rey Mysterio, and even guys like Jeff Jarrett or I'm just trying to think of more guys, but that type of
Yeah.
guy that can go in there, or Chris Canyon, guys can go in there and work a good match with you. And I got to wrestle Joe Gomez, which Joe Gomez is the most wonderful person I ever met. But I wasn't having a Rey Mysterio match, with Joe Gomez, right? I had to wrestle Renegade, or I had to wrestle, like that type of match. It's just, I wanted to work and show them what I could do. We had to wrestle Public Enemy, love those guys. We had to wrestle them a few times. But yeah, it was okay. I mean, it was all right. I was 22 at the time. I remember one time we wrestled Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, and I wrestled Kevin Nash a few times in the WWF. And he remembered me, and he loved working with me. He was a really nice guy to me. So we wrestled them on Nitro, and then it was like the following week, and they flew you everywhere. WWF was all driving. They flew you everywhere. So me and Crowbar, we were like 22 at the time. We were too young to even rent a car. So we would get to the airport. There was no Uber back then, and we'd figure out a way. Either we'd make friends on the plane and say, "Hey, do you have a car at the airport? Can you drive us to a hotel near the?" And we did. It's shocking how some people let us in their car, but yeah, um, or that we'd get in their car. But anyway, um, or we'd get to the airport and I remember Johnny Swinger in High Voltage. We ran into. So guys, can we bum a ride with you? Or you figure something out when you got there. That's kind of crazy when you think about it. But so we got to an airport and we just wrestled Hall and Nash like the week before, and we're walking through and we hear "Yo!" and we look and it's Kevin Nash sitting down on the payphone. He goes like that to us, like, "Wait up." So like, "Hey man," it's like, "Where are you guys going?" We're like, "We're gonna try and find a hotel." He's like, "You got a car?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Come with me." So he got a cab and he's talking to us. He's like, "You're working with us tonight?" We're like, "No, I think we're working with the Steiners or something." He's like, "Nope." He goes, "Who do you think books around here?" I go, "Oh." He goes, "I do." He goes, "You're working with us tonight." So he took us to a hotel and he paid for our cab. So yes, that was cool. And he just again answered our questions and talked to us. He told us he made, I want to say 800 grand for the WWF his year as a champion, but he was on the road like 296 days. He's on the road now for like 120 days, and he's making like double that money. Like he just said, what a great deal WCW was. Like how could he say no to a deal like whatever WCW was offering him.
Yeah.
So
I mean, he basically, along with Hall and Hogan, changed the face of the business with the NWO gimmick and faction, and it just skyrocketed. So I've always heard good things about Kevin Nash and being a stand-up guy.
yeah, but you never know. Like you never know. They could have signed Hall and Nash, and no one knew the NWO was going to be a thing, and no one knew the NWO was going to be so big. It's got to be scary to jump to a company that didn't do anything with you the first time.
Mm,
They could have put him out there as Oz again, but I guess if you're making 1.5 million dollars a year for 120 days, you'd wear the Oz mask with pride.
yeah,
You take whatever they can get.
I know. It's crazy how to think about, like, that literally changed the face of pro wrestling and Monday Night Wars and the Attitude Era. I don't think it would have gotten that far if it wasn't for the NWO. That
Yeah.
there wouldn't have been a DX either if that was the case. So yeah,
But would WCW? It's hard to say, but would they still stay in bit? Would they have stayed in business if they weren't competing with WWF? Like it just sucks. There's no WCW. I mean, yeah, there's AEW now, but man, I never thought you'd see the day there was no WCW. That sucks.
yeah. I mean, it was seemed like a lot of great talent came from there, and they went on to be megastars. You've wrestled for numerous promotions and have done a lot of charity work involved with those shows. Talk about some of the benefits that you've performed on and some of the organizations you've worked with to help raise money for stuff.
Sure. I mean, there's always benefit shows. There's always benefit shows for either if a wrestler passes away to help out with his family or his funeral costs. There's always memorial shows. We did shows for a promotion that always did a yearly event for Easter seals, and they have their telethon right there at the show, so you don't get paid for the show. Whatever you're going to get paid, they donate to the event, to the charity. But yeah, I mean, independent wrestling is always huge on charity shows. There, I mean, whether it's kids with sickness, or yeah, it's always there's a lot of there's more charity shows or benefit shows than people think on the indies, and promoters will call you and say, hey, can you give up your time for this event? And yeah, you want to do it because you want to give back.
What do you recall a specific charity that you helped out with over the course of your career that was your
I mean,
favorite?
definitely Easter seals, because they would come and they would do their telethon right there, and the matches would be in the back. So it was always cool. And then you got to go to where the people were pledging. You got to, ask people to help out as much as they could as well, and be a part of the telethon. So that was always fun. It was every summer, I believe, and it was just fun to be a part of something that you watch on TV, and now you're in the background wrestling as people are donating money.
Pretty cool to have that experience. For those that are watching or listening, can you tell me about what Easter Seals is and what they do?
I mean, at the time, this was 20 years ago. I believe it was helping sick children out, in children's hospitals, and research on whatever illness it was that they had the telethons for. But it was definitely sick children.
And did this air on television? Did
Yeah,
this?
yeah. It wasn't like national. Well, I don't believe it was a national telethon, but it was definitely in Pennsylvania.
Oh wow,
It was a yearly event.
a yearly event. Wow. Did you do this every year? Was this once a year?
It was once a year for like 4 years
Hmm.
that we drive down to Pennsylvania, and you just give your day up for charity.
Yeah, that's very nice. Why do you feel passionate about helping out in your community?
Well, I mean, you are what you are because of the people around you, and you don't get anywhere in life without people's help. And sometimes people just need a little bit of help. Like you never know what people are going through, and you never know what people need. And like every Christmas, I say to my wife, let's try and find a family that can't give their kids the Christmas that we give our kids, and let's just send them something. It's just sometimes a little bit goes a long way with people. Because I think back to wrestling, like a little advice sometimes, or a little good job, kid. It wasn't money, but it was help, and sometimes stuff like that gets people to the next level in their life. So it's always important it doesn't cost anything extra to be nice to people.
No, it
And if you can
doesn't.
financially help people out a little bit and give up your time, then it's worth it. Whether it's my daughters did Girl Scouts back in the day, so whenever they have an event, you gotta support your community and help out as much as you can, and hopefully they'll do it for you, and if you ever need it. There was a family that the girl in my son's class lost their mother, and I couldn't imagine waking up Christmas morning and not having my mother. So and he had 4 kids, so we just sent them 4 $25 gift cards to Walmart and said, put this under the tree and try and give your kids an extra special, Christmas. It's just something simple like that. I mean, did that take away the pain of their mom? No. Did it maybe help them give them a little better Christmas morning so they can at least smile a little more, maybe. I just can't think about a kid losing their parent and having their first Christmas without them. I'm 49. I still have both my parents and both my in-laws. I'm very lucky.
Hmm. That's very nice. And I'm glad to hear that your parents are
Yeah.
still around. Yeah. So let's talk about your podcast on a
Aw-
happier note. Rest,
Awesome. Yeah.
yeah, Wrestling Then and Now. How did you get started with this? What was the idea?
So
Get started.
my neighbor John, he hates when I call him neighbor. So my friend John, who was right across the street from me, it was last July. We're out by hanging out outside by the pool, and I said, I need a side hustle. I need a few bucks, and he goes, you need to start a YouTube channel. And I'm like, no. I'm like, that's ridiculous. But then he goes, you have so many wrestling connections. My friend Tommy Fierro runs 80s cons. He has the Wrestling Collector Store. He runs ISPW Wrestling. He's like, you go to so many cool wrestling events. He goes, start recording. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. No one knows who I am. So I started thinking, my kids, they don't watch TV. My kids don't watch TV. They watch YouTube. My kids don't play with toys. They go on YouTube and watch other kids play with their toys. Like the day after Christmas last year, they're watching their favorite YouTube kids open their Christmas toys. I'm like, play with yours. So I'm like, you know, you might be onto something here. And I wasn't like an old grizzled vet who hated wrestling because I didn't make it. I don't know. I just kind of distanced myself from wrestling because I don't know. I just did. Maybe a part of me like just didn't embrace it anymore. And I'm like, you know what? You might be on something. And I have so many wrestling friends, and I have so many connections through my own connections, and through Tommy's connections that I start thinking, yeah, you know what? I do have a lot of cool stuff. And I kind of at first wanted to do something where it was just me like recording the cool events I go to and not be on camera. And then I'm like, no, you know what? I guess I gotta have to be on camera. And then I start reaching out to the guys I've known forever, like Scotty Too Hottie or Crowbar, Big Vito, Cherry, Queewee, Alan Funk, like guys I know who would say, yeah, or Steve Carino, Stevie Richards, guys who I know personally, Darren Young. I'm forgetting a million people. Danny Doring, who I know would say yes because of our relationship. And then I know like I'm friends with guys uh, through wrestling, and I have connection through Tommy Fierro, guys like Bill Eadie, Demolition Axe, Demolition Smash, Tito, Jim Brunzell, guys who I have a million numbers on my phone. I'm like, let me start texting people I know. And before you know it, it 90% people say, yeah, I got Fandango, or or I reach out to people I've never met before, and I'm just humble, and I say, I used to wrestle. I'd love to have you on. I have no hidden agenda. I don't ask the dirt. Would you mind coming on? I reach out to like Baby Doll
Hmm.
or um, guys I've never met before. Chris Harris, I just had on, or just big name guys. I've had a lot of had Craig DeGeorge on. I had
Wow.
I know I'm free. I have like a list of people. Brooklyn Brawler, Mike Chioda. So there's some guys I know from back in the day, and some guys are doing friends for someone else. Like my friend Bobby Rydell hooked me up with a few people. And it's just word of mouth, and it's awesome. It's my wrestling therapy,
Yeah.
and it's just it's just two guys talking wrestling,
That's
and
awesome.
it's awesome. Wrestling Then and Now. Give it a subscribe. I try and post every day, and it's just listen. I always say this too. Like I'm not the biggest wrestling name by no means, but I have a story. Everybody's got a story, and if you're a wrestling fan, it's pretty cool to hear other people's story. I'll interview somebody who I know is not a big name guy, and I'm like, man, it's a shame more people aren't going to click on this video because his stories are awesome. Or I reached out to my friend Kevin Kelly, who was an announcer with
Yeah.
WWE,
Hmm.
and guys like that. Yeah, they come on, they give an hour of their time or however long they will, and it's my wrestling therapy. I love it, and I feel like I'm part of wrestling again. And through that, now I'm doing more interviews like this, and I get to talk my story, and it's just
Yeah.
fun, man. It's just fun chatting wrestling.
It is. Mike, this has been wonderful getting the chance to talk with you about your career and what you've done outside of wrestling. Where can people find you on social media?
Facebook, Mike Maraldo. Instagram, Mike Maraldo. I'm also Instagram for wrestling. I am Wrestling Then and Now on Instagram. I'm WWF Golden Era on Instagram. YouTube, Wrestling Then and Now. Click to subscribe, support myself, support my buddy Stan's channel, and yeah, that's how you can reach me.
Yeah, fellow podcaster, any words of advice you would like to give me as far as, growing the show?
Uh, Good question, because my show isn't really that big, but just be nice to people, which you seem to be already doing that. Show people respect when they're on, which you seem to already do that. Don't have an agenda. There's a lot of people who come on the show that are a little apprehensive because there are people who ask really dumb questions and really personal questions. I mean, if someone's willing to give you their time, be respectful like you are, and you should do fine.
Definitely. Mike, thank you again for coming on to Wrestling with Heart, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll talk to you later.
Awesome. Thanks, bud.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.